I sit in the conference room and I see my own name on a contract I never signed. The signature line reads T. Crowe, in the same slanted font our system always uses, sitting under terms I have never once discussed with this client. The client across the table thanks me for agreeing to the new pricing. He says it warmly, like he is doing me a favor by mentioning it. I never agreed to anything. I open my mouth to say so, and then I stop. Ronan is already speaking over me, smooth and unhurried, the way he speaks whenever he wants a room to settle before I finish a sentence. He says I approved the final numbers by phone last Tuesday. I know that is not true, because I remember exactly where I was last Tuesday. I remember the boarding gate at 6 in the morning. I remember the specific burnt smell of the airport coffee. I remember checking my phone twice for a text from Ronan that never came. At the time, I assumed that meant nothing was urgent. My boarding pass for that Denver flight is still in my email, timestamped an hour before this contract was supposedly discussed on a call I never took. Ronan taps his knuckle against the table twice, the way he always does right before he closes a subject for good. You're worrying about nothing, he says, and he says it to me, not to the client, like the client's satisfaction is the only fact that matters in the room. The client nods. The meeting moves on to scheduling. I do not argue. I write the date down in the corner of my notepad where no one else will read it. That night, at home, I fold the printed contract twice at the top right corner, the way I fold every document that matters to me, then smooth it flat again with my thumb before I slide it into a plain folder. It is a habit so old I no longer notice myself doing it, something my grandmother taught me before I understood why it mattered to keep things in order. Ronan has his own habit. He clips his signed pages with a black pen that has a brass clasp. It is always the same pen. He rests it flat on top of whatever he has just finished signing, like a flag staked into new ground. I clip mine differently. I use an old silver butterfly clip that used to sit on my grandmother's desk, and I only bring it out for documents I intend to keep for a long time. I did not think that night that I would need to remember which of us used which. I think about it constantly now. 3 days pass before the next thing happens. Ronan calls a staff meeting without telling me first, which he has never done before, not once in 3 years of running this company together. He stands at the head of the table, and he announces, to 12 people who report to both of us equally, that I will be stepping back from leading client negotiations for a while. He frames it as concern. She needs fewer things on her plate, he says, and 2 people actually nod, like it is kindness rather than a door quietly closing. I do not argue that day either. Across the table, Nell Vardon, our financial controller, lines up the coins she keeps beside her keyboard into a single straight row while she watches the light of Ronan's laptop screen reflect faintly in the window glass behind him. She notices something before I do. My CRM access level has already changed. Someone downgraded it before the meeting even started, which means this was never a suggestion. It was already decided. The following week, a client calls to thank me personally for lowering their retainer by 15%. I tell him, as calmly as I can manage, that I approved no such reduction. Ronan is in the room when the call comes through, on speaker, and he does not raise his voice at all. He only smiles, the same smile he uses in every client meeting, and suggests that I have probably confused 2 different calls from that week. Gideon Shaw, who runs client operations for us, is standing by the doorway with a folder in his hand, and he hears every word of it. He does not say anything yet. He also does not look away, which is new. Later that afternoon, I open the CRM myself, quietly, at my own desk, and I find a note logged beside my name on that account. Approved by T. Crowe. I did not write it. I have never written a note in that particular format in 3 years of using this system. Ronan's black pen sits capped on his desk when I walk past his open door, resting on top of a folder, and for the first time it looks less like a pen and more like something planted there on purpose. I think, more than once that week, about how the 2 of us built this company in the first place. Ronan and I met at a conference 9 years ago, long before either of us had a client list worth defending, and for the first 4 years he was exactly the partner I would have described to anyone who asked. Careful with clients. Generous with credit in meetings. The kind of person who remembers a birthday without being reminded. Somewhere in the last 3 years, that generosity narrowed into something else, a habit of deciding what I needed to know and when I needed to know it, and I let it narrow, because it happened slowly enough that no single day felt like the day everything changed. For a while I tell myself it is a misunderstanding, because that is easier to live with than the alternative, and because I have spent 3 years building the habit of trusting him with things I probably should have kept for myself. A misunderstanding, though, does not repeat itself 4 separate times, in 4 separate ways, across 4 separate weeks. And I am not a woman who forgets her own calendar, whatever he wants the room to believe. There is a fourth incident, smaller than the others, easy to miss if I had not already started paying attention. A vendor invoice arrives addressed to me, thanking me for confirming a new service tier over email, an email I never sent from an account only I am supposed to control. I check the sent folder myself that night at home, quietly, and find nothing. I check the server logs the next morning using the access I still technically hold as co-owner. I find a login from inside our own building at an hour when I was nowhere near a computer. I do not mention it to anyone yet. I simply add it to a list that only exists in a notebook I keep at home, a list with dates on one side and small unanswered questions on the other. My old badge stops opening the door to the archive room around the same time, though nobody tells me my access has changed. I only learn it the hard way, standing in the hallway with a folder in my hands and the little red light on the reader blinking back at me, the same door that let me through without a second's pause a month earlier. I do not raise it with facilities. I do not raise it with Ronan. I simply note the date, fold it into the same small habit of keeping things in order, and walk back to my desk. I stay late one evening, well past when everyone else has gone home, to retrieve a charging cable I left behind that morning. The conference room light is off, but Ronan's laptop is still open on the table, screen glowing faintly in the dark. He left in a hurry, called into a video meeting somewhere else in the building, and the screen never had a chance to lock behind him. I should not look at it. I look anyway, because some part of me has been waiting for exactly this kind of accident for weeks without admitting it to myself. A folder sits open on his desktop. Final Contracts, T. Crowe. Inside it is a contract carrying my name, dated for a day I was in Colorado, the same day I remember standing at that gate with burnt coffee in my hand. Beside the folder is an email draft, unsent, addressed to someone I cannot see yet. She'll sign anything once I explain it. The words sit there on the screen, plain and unhurried, exactly the way he talks. I check the creation timestamp on the contract file. 11:43 at night, on a night I remember clearly, because I was asleep in my own bed by 10. A small blue light on the edge of his laptop still blinks steadily, marking a call that ended somewhere else in the building without him ever noticing his screen had stayed unlocked. I take a single photograph with my phone. I do not copy the file onto anything. I do not open a second window. I do not touch a single other icon on that desktop. I close the laptop exactly the way I found it, take my charging cable off the side table, and go home in silence. I do not confront him that night, or the next morning, or the week after that. I do not tell Nell, Gideon, or my sister yet. Instead, I start building something quieter than an accusation. Not a case against Ronan, not at first, just a record of what actually happened, laid out in order, with proof behind every line of it. Every document I touch from that point forward gets a date and a source. I keep the original version and a separate copy. I record who had access to it and where I was that day, down to the flight number if I have one. I am a co-owner of this company. I have every legal right to the archive. I am simply rebuilding a second, private copy. I change nothing that already exists on the shared system. I only make certain that nothing can ever vanish twice. Building that private archive is quieter work than I expected. Most evenings I stay an extra hour after everyone else leaves, late enough that the floor is empty and the only sound is the hum of the servers down the hall. I photograph originals before I file them. I keep 2 copies of everything, one on a drive that never leaves my apartment, one printed and folded twice at the top right corner, the way I fold every document that matters. Nobody asks what I am doing, because on paper I am doing exactly what I have always done, closing out the day's paperwork before I go home. I ask Nell to check the finances properly, without telling her the full reason yet, and it does not take her long to find something worth showing me. She lines the coins up beside her keyboard again while she pulls the transaction history, and she finds 3 separate payments to the same outside vendor, none of them tied to a signed agreement anywhere in our files. $41,700 total, moved out over 8 months in amounts small enough that no one above her had ever flagged them individually. She slides the printout across her desk to me without saying a word, because by now we have both quietly learned to be careful about what we say out loud inside this building. I open a personal bank account he has no visibility into, and I move into it exactly what already belongs to me, my own savings, built slowly. Nothing that touches a single dollar of company money. I interview with a firm based in Seattle using my own phone and personal email. I schedule every interview after office hours. They offer me the role I actually want, head of client operations. It is a company where no one has ever once told me I have too much on my plate. I sign the contract in a coffee shop near the water, and I rent a small apartment near the waterfront, quietly, moving in a few boxes at a time over several weekends, most of them still sitting for now in my sister's garage. Ronan starts to notice, slowly, that something in me has shifted, though he cannot name what it is yet. At first it seems to irritate him that I have stopped arguing with him in meetings. Then he notices that I ask clarifying questions instead of simply agreeing, small precise questions that leave a paper trail behind them without ever sounding like an accusation. Then, a few weeks later, he starts asking where I go in the evenings after work, a question he has never once asked me in 3 years, and I give him nothing. Because for the first time since we started this company, there is somewhere to go that belongs entirely to me and to no one else. Bryony asks no questions when I bring the first boxes over to her place. She only listens while I explain a little, one palm resting flat against the rim of her coffee cup without ever lifting it to drink, the way she does when she is holding something steady inside herself so that I do not have to hold it entirely alone. I tell her that I finally signed something with only my own name at the bottom of it, no one else's approval required, and she nods slowly, like she has been waiting 3 quiet years to hear that exact sentence out loud. Nell and I start meeting outside the office after this, twice a week, at a diner 2 blocks from the building where neither of our names means anything to the staff behind the counter. She brings printouts folded into her bag instead of emailing anything through the company system, and I bring the growing file from home, and between the 2 of us we start matching her numbers against my dates, 1 line at a time. She tells me once, over coffee neither of us finishes, that she almost said something to Ronan directly the day she noticed my CRM access had changed, before she decided it was safer to watch quietly instead and see where the pattern led. I tell her I am glad she waited, because a single warning to him that early would have taught him only to hide things better, not to stop. Gideon, meanwhile, has started going back through old CRM records on his own time, after hours, without telling anyone what he is doing. Before he brings anything difficult to another person, he takes his watch off his wrist and sets it face down on the desk in front of him, a small habit I never asked him about until much later. When I finally understood, it meant he was about to say something he could not take back. He finds 4 separate client decisions logged as approved by me across the past year. One of them directly contradicts an email thread from the very same afternoon, a thread I was never even copied on. He does not bring what he has found to Ronan. He brings it to me instead, quietly, after everyone else has left the floor. Gideon and I speak only once about why he decided to help me instead of simply staying out of it, which would have been the easier choice for someone in his position. He tells me he assumed at first, like most people in the office did, that this was an ordinary disagreement between 2 partners who would sort it out privately and move on. Then he pulled the second contradicting record, then a third, and somewhere around the 4th he stopped being able to convince himself it was ordinary. He says this quietly, watch already off his wrist, face down on the table between us, and he does not dress it up as anything more heroic than it was. He just says the numbers stopped adding up, and he could not keep pretending they did. I bring everything I've gathered to Mavis Rook, an outside corporate lawyer with no history in this company and nothing personal at stake in either direction, which is exactly why her word will eventually carry weight that mine alone cannot. She does not promise to destroy anyone, and she tells me clearly that the strongest evidence will never be one forged signature standing alone. It will be the pattern sitting underneath all of them together. She reads by running her fingernails slowly beneath a single dated line on each document instead of marking it with a pen, a habit that makes every page she reads feel like it is being measured rather than skimmed. Together, over several careful weeks, we begin assembling a formal file. Each interview leaves me a little more certain that I am not imagining the difference between how this new firm talks about my work and how Ronan has started talking about it. The hiring director there asks about the scope of accounts I have managed, listens to the actual answer, and does not once suggest that the number of accounts might be more than I can handle. By the time I've moved the last of the boxes into the apartment near the water, the file at home has grown thick enough that it no longer fits in a single box. I split it into 3, one for the forged documents, one for the financial trail Nell helped me trace, one for everything Gideon has quietly pulled from the CRM. Mavis tells me boards do not respond well to a single dramatic accusation. They respond to a timeline they can follow with their own eyes, each page dated and sourced, until the pattern becomes impossible to argue with. Ronan finally asks me directly, one evening in the office when it is just the two of us left, what exactly I am planning. He asks it lightly, like he already expects the answer to be nothing, the same way he has expected every answer from me to be nothing for 3 straight years. I tell him nothing he needs to worry about, and for the first time in 3 years I am the one handing his own sentence back to him, though he does not seem to notice the shape of it yet. He has no idea that I have already signed a new employment contract in another city. He does not know about the apartment near the water. He certainly does not know about the legal file, thick enough now to stand entirely on its own. In the final week before the meeting, Mavis walks me through it once, briefly, because she says surprise is useful against Ronan, but not against me. The night before, I stand at the window of my apartment with the water dark below me, and I practice saying almost nothing out loud until the silence stops feeling difficult to hold. The board meeting is called for a private room in Seattle, arranged formally through Mavis rather than through either of us directly. Ronan believes, right up until he walks in, that it has been called over an ordinary partner disagreement, the kind that gets smoothed over with a firmer division of duties. Nell is there. Gideon is there. Mavis is there, seated calmly at the end of the table, along with 2 board members neither of us has met in person before this. Ronan taps his knuckle twice against the table before he speaks, the same gesture he has used for 3 years to close a subject, and tells the board that I am reacting emotionally to routine business decisions. He lays the forged contract flat on the table in front of him like it settles the entire matter on its own. Ronan speaks for almost 10 minutes before anyone interrupts him, laying out a version of the last few months in which I have grown distant, difficult, unpredictable. A partner quietly pulling away from responsibilities he has only ever tried to lighten for my sake. It is a good version. It is delivered calmly, in the same voice he has used on every client call for 3 years, and for a moment I watched 2 of the board members nodding along with it exactly the way our own staff used to nod. Then Mavis asks, politely, whether the board would like to see the underlying documentation before continuing the discussion, and the room goes quiet in a different way than before. Mavis connects her own secured laptop to the screen at the front of the room and pulls up the original files and the access logs, not the printed copy Ronan brought with him. For the first time in 3 years, the room sees the underlying data instead of his explanation of it. Creation timestamp. IP address log. Full version history. My actual location on the exact day in question, pulled from travel records neither of us thought to hide. The complete history of the digital signature itself, generated from a corporate account Ronan had access to, and I never once touched that day. He does not have a fast answer this time, and everyone at the table notices the silence where his answer should be. Nell lines the coins up one last time out of pure habit, then opens the payment ledger on the shared screen. $41,700, she says, flat and clear. No contract behind it. No approval on file anywhere. Then she stops. For the first time since I have known her, she leaves the coins scattered across the table instead of straightening them. You knew, she says, looking straight at Ronan. You knew exactly what you were doing. Gideon takes his watch off, sets it face down on the table, and opens the CRM records he has already prepared. You marked 4 of these as Tamsin's approvals, he says, looking directly at Ronan rather than at the board. I was in 2 of those meetings myself. Then he adds the part that matters most. She never approved them. You just kept telling her she was worrying about nothing. Mavis runs her fingernail under the dated line one more time, on a 4th document now, and says plainly that this is not her authorization. She lays 3 additional documents beside the first one on the table. It is no longer my word against his certainty, the way it has been for 3 years inside this building. It is a documented, repeated pattern, and every person in that room can see it laid out plainly in front of them. Ronan tries once more to steer the room, pointing out that a signature format or a login record can be misread, that systems make mistakes, that none of this proves intent on anyone's part. Mavis lets him finish completely before she answers, which I have come to understand is her own version of the knuckle tap, a small deliberate pause that makes whatever comes next land harder. She tells the board that a single misread record might be a mistake. 4, spanning 3 separate clients and 2 separate systems, all pointing toward the same beneficiary, are not a mistake. She says the word pattern again, quietly, and lets it sit in the room without adding anything further to it. Bryony speaks last, present as a witness to a single personal document I had given her to hold for safekeeping before any of this ever became official. She keeps her palm resting on the rim of her cup, steady, and tells the board that I did not prepare any of this out of a wish for revenge. I prepared it, she says, because I knew no one would ever believe me without proof sitting in front of them. One of the board members, a quiet woman who has said nothing until now, asks Ronan directly how he explains the timestamp on the original file, 11:43 at night, on an evening when every login record shows Tamsin was already at home. He starts to answer, stops, starts again with a different sentence, and stops a second time. For 3 years I have watched him fill silence before anyone else in the room even notices it forming. He cannot fill this one. Ronan looks at me across the length of the table. You are keeping copies this whole time, he says, and it is not really phrased as a question anymore. I square the top edge of the last document in the file in front of me, the same small motion I make with every paper that matters to me. I wasn't worrying about nothing, I say. I was keeping copies. After the meeting ends, Ronan follows me out into the hallway alone. He offers me a new ownership structure on the spot, a larger share of the company, the right to personally approve every future contract myself from now on. He is offering me permission, even now, at the exact moment he has lost every bit of power to grant it to anyone. I don't need your permission to use my own name, I tell him, and I keep walking toward the elevator without waiting for whatever he says next. His black pen is left behind on the table in that room, capped, resting on nothing now, no longer a flag planted on anyone's ground. Beside it sits the dissolution agreement, already drafted by Mavis weeks earlier. I sign it with my own pen, at my own desk the next morning, and I clip the finished pages together with the old silver butterfly clip that used to mean save this for later. It means something different to me now. It means this particular story is finished. 3 years of quiet copies were never a sign of fear, whatever it might have looked like from the outside. They were the reason I could walk away without needing to ask a single person in that room to simply take my word for it. Nell takes a controller role 2 floors below mine in my new Seattle building, close enough that we still get coffee most Fridays. A few months later, my name sits on a door of my own, in a building Ronan has never once set foot in, above contracts no one else has ever touched or altered on my behalf. Every signature under my name now is one I actually put there myself. So here is the question I keep coming back to some nights, when the office is quiet and everyone else has already gone home. Was that a fair ending, or would you have gone further?